Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fantasy Fiends podcast / YouTube show, the one-stop place to learn about sci-fi and fantasy, and we make it weird for people who haven't seen our show before.
What is a one-stop place exactly, Stevie?
Well, we're the only place because there's no podcast show like this for fantasy sci-fi readers out there. I'm trying to brand us, you mofo. Okay. I'm trying to brand us. I'm trying to take us.
We will be the greatest one-stop place in history.
If you want, like, you can't go on vacation because of the pandemic, you watch Fantasy Fiends. That's it. You ran out of episode. What are people watching nowadays? Enchanted?
I don't know. What?
That show's horrible, by the way.
What is Enchanted?
It's like Peter Pan's the bad guy. He's like a pedo. I don't know what he is. It's weird. And it's like a sci-fi channel. Remember Sci-Fi, the channel?
I do know. Oh, no.
They have good stuff now, but back in the day, sci-fi TV shows were like horrible CGI, and it was like embarrassing to watch. Like, it was just like, oh my God. That's what Enchanted is, except with like you fall in love with a mermaid plot lines. I don't know. I didn't give it a chance because I saw the CGI. I was like, oh my God. You've made me into a snob, Andy. Well, so today,
how did I make you into a snob? I want to understand this.
All right, you're so good at talking about movies, breaking them down, and you made me want to be like that too. And like you're the way you describe Wonder Woman makes me cream my panties. It's just amazing the way you do things. You could be a director.
Snobbery 101. Don't say things like cream your panties. It's just not a snobby term, Stevie.
I should probably wait for a male guest too before I make those jokes.
You should probably wait until another totally different podcast to make those jokes.
I'm going to start my own podcast. In fact, not have a podcast, just talk to myself in my closet.
Just make ridiculous and horrible jokes. That would be a great show for everybody.
Well, you can already see where this is going. Today I am Stevie, but tomorrow I am not. I am Stevie Coyer, and I'm here with my co-host, Andy Peliquin, and today we are honored to have the awesome, the amazing Kaylena Radcliffe. No relation, but we wish there was a relation. We've asked. We had to make sure she wasn't a Gryffindor. It kind of runs in the family, right? Like the houses run in the family. You're mostly Gryffindor, like the Weasleys.
Right. You know, I did actually take that house quiz, and I'm a Gryffindor, of course.
Oh, me
for
too.
Some reason, so.
Me too. You look like you'd be a Gryffindor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So brave.
What does a Gryffindor look like, Stevie?
White privilege.
That's Slytherin, man.
Slytherin. Oh my God, dude, oh my God, you're very right. Actually, it's like private school kids who are just like hate public school kids. I went to private school, and I was scared of public school kids. Our teacher, one of them, told us that they put like genetic stuff in the milk to make them grow, and like, it's funny. It was true. It came out. It was true, and they were growing facial hair by like 15. It was for the football teams. Small town in Texas, right? No, but before I go any further on this, we have Kaylena Radcliffe. She is the author of a title of a book that is not only brave, I really like. It's Mouse. It's just Mouse. It sounds like something I would do, and that is the Elmness Chronicles. Am I saying that right? Elmness.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
Elmness.
The Elmness Chronicles.
So I'm already excited to jump into this one. Again, we've already covered she is not of magical blood. She is what do they call I want to say Muslim. Muzzles? What do they call them when you don't have magic blood? A mudblood.
A muggle?
A muggle. Yeah, and I'm like, a Muslim. A Muslim. A Muslim. Today we have another awesome, fantastic episode for you today, and that is What's Your Core? And I'm guessing that's like, what's your core belief system?
Exactly.
Okay. God, there's a lot of dark jokes in that like vector. Got to be careful of. But Kaylena, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and help me shut up?
Okay, hi. Well, my name is Kaylena, and first and foremost, I just want to thank you guys so much for having me on tonight. I'm excited to be here and talk about core beliefs. I am the author of the Elmness Chronicles. Mouse is the first book. I'm working on the second and the third, and hopefully have them out in a couple months. Well, the second book in a couple months. So we're working on that. I am the wife of a pastor. So I'm not sure that you normally get that on your podcast, but that's
we will be very, very careful what we say now.
No worries. I'm not offended. And I work for a nonprofit. Work for a magazine, so I do a lot of writing and editing on the side as well. And I am a speculative author. So I generally like to write speculative fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, whatever there is. Sometimes a little bit of horror in there. Every now and then.
Half of the things that have come out of my mouth would not have come out if I had known all that. I'm a Bible man myself, as I call myself. So I have another YouTube channel where I talk about the Bible and stuff. And my character on there I named him Brometheus. Just because I teach the Bible in a bro way. And I just came out with a video called David and Goliath. And I just kind of break through the story of David and Goliath. The way it should have been told in school. But it's all like real stuff that happened in the Bible. There's no, like I actually broke down how tall Goliath was and David and how much the armor weighed and stuff. And the audience is supposed to be like 20 to 30 years old. Well, I get this 80-year-old woman who's like, thank you so much for explaining it this way. I'm like, you're welcome, Carolyn. It wasn't for you, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. I feel kind of stupid, but yeah.
She liked it. That's fine, right?
It is nice. It was nice, and it helps because that's not my most popular content. People want to hear about how to get rich using the law of attraction or how God can help you make you rich. They don't want to learn about the J-Man, or they may want to learn about Bathsheba, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to learn about Bathsheba.
I feel like everybody in the world would like to learn about Bathsheba.
Well, her father was really smart. But anyway. I forgot his name. I want to call him Hashima, but he was
definitely not that.
Yeah. Okay, so at the beginning of all of our shows, we always like to talk about something cool that's happened with us recently to kind of give you guys a look into the windows of our life, to look through the window of my bathroom while I'm sitting down enjoying myself. That's what I want you to be. I want to be intimate like that with you. And today we're going to talk about what you know what we're about to do.
Yeah, Stevie, tell us the cool things that happened to you this week.
Well, I can tell you what didn't happen, and that is I didn't get stung by a freaking wasp to the face. That was really nice. And something cool that happened to me this previous week. Honestly, Andy, can you take over this one? I didn't give it much thought. Honestly.
Story of the Fantasy Fiends podcast right there. Andy, can you take over? I didn't give this one much thought.
At least I'm not just talking out of my butt like usual. I want to give the people what they want.
Absolutely.
I'll look through my bathroom window. Let me think about it though.
Okay. So for me, a couple of cool things happened this week. On Tuesday, Cyber Strike, the third book in the Cerberus series, came out, and that one I was so excited about that because it's the first time that he's got like people to be there with him. Before it was always kind of him talking to himself and the AI in his head, but this is the first time like actually having someone next to him to, kill bad guys essentially. But it's really fun, and that's when things start getting bigger and more interesting. And also today I started work on book 8 in the series. I don't have a name for it yet. It's called Nolan versus the Rebel Scum thus far. That's the working title. Every one of the books has like a versus title. So the last one was Assassin versus Assassin. This one is him versus the Rebel Scum because, who doesn't love Star Wars?
Oh, I hate it. I hate it so much that I have the comics right behind me. That's awesome, Andy. Yeah, I got an alert, and I got to say, I think that's my favorite cover besides I don't want to give it away, but the one he's like on the planet with the gun. He's like hanging from something.
Oh, Kill Order.
Okay, yeah, Kill Order.
Oh, no, the one, Paragon Slayer. They sent you the alert for the book 4, which is up for pre-order, and the book 4 has like this Hitman 47 vibe, and you just know shit's about to go down when he moves, he makes his move, and I really, really like that cover. But I already saw the preliminary stuff for book 5, the cover for book 5 that they're working on, and it is badass as all hell.
Yeah. Oh. You know what, Andy? I haven't seen any of these covers, but I thought anyway. Well, that's really cool, man. Good news for Kaylena. Do you know yours?
My good news?
Yes.
Just something cool or interesting that's happened to you in the last week.
Oh, well, something cool or interesting. So our state hasn't been on lockdown for basically 3 months. So one cool thing that's happened in the past 2 weeks is that we're in the yellow stage, which means I can actually go outside and see people. So that's exciting. We've been able to get together with a few people, and our sanity is returning. So that's very nice.
That's awesome. Oh yeah, that happened to me too last night. I, for the first time in months, got to go and have game night with friends. We played Pandemic. Appropriate game.
Okay. That's a Stevie choice right there.
Yeah,
Let's just
pretty much.
That's awesome, Kaylena. That's good to hear. The whole quarantine thing, as people know, hasn't bothered me at all. I've enjoyed staying in, and I see people every day, I feel like, so it's been good to kind of just sit back and get organized. My good news would have to be that there is a brand new surf park in Austin, or not Austin, Texas, but
you said that one. You said that one last week.
Yes.
You got to come up with new good news.
The new good news is I am reserving like 2 days of surfing. That's my good news. Yes. And it's an hour each, and they're like $75 each. But I mean, oh my God, I'm so excited. And I know just 1 day is enough to kind of put you in bed and not be able to move. So I'm doing 2 days. Just gonna have to bring an old wheelchair or something. But some good news. I talked to Lisa's dad, and he's the one who helped formulate all the science behind book 1 and book 2. And we came up with this really awesome idea for book 3. And he was like, those QR codes?
Yeah.
It's like a digital infection. So you get it and it starts spreading over your face, and you can kind of tell what kind of monster you're going to become based on the code. It's in very early development stages in my brain, but I'm cooking it up there. That rice pot is cooking. So I thought it was a cool idea, and it could depend on like the color of it, and maybe it fails and you die. I don't know. I've got some cool ideas. So that's my good news. And
this is for a new series?
No. So I'm kind of doing like an anime thing with new arcs. So we solve the problem of book 1 and book 3, and then we move on to one that is connected, and it's a new 3-book thing.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. So that's my good news. Well, awesome. So today we are talking about the core. What's your core? Let's get to the core of this core topic. And Kaylena, being the one that came up with it, why don't you tell us a little bit about it? And also, why don't you tell us a little bit about your book as well?
Sure. So the idea that every author has some core beliefs that's going to influence the way that they write and the way that they present the worlds that they build. And you can see this like in some of our favorite, most popular fantasy authors. You look at C.S. Lewis. His conversion to Christianity deeply influenced the way that he built his Narnia, the Chronicles of Narnia, and how he worked all of those allegorical elements into the story, and really is telling a story that deeply reflects his beliefs. And even when you look at Tolkien, who was somebody who despised allegory. Actually, funny story that I found out recently is that Tolkien would not endorse Lewis's works because he found the idea of allegory so disgusting, like he wouldn't read it. But even as he was a Roman Catholic, and you have these elements in his books that reflect his faith as well. You have the Christological figures, the redemption arcs. So the dark versus the light. So you see that in Tolkien as well. And so the idea behind our core beliefs is that we write what we believe, and we build worlds that reflect what we deeply believe.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And before I forget about C.S. Lewis, I just learned, seriously, 2 days ago that if you don't know who C.S. Lewis is, I mean, come on. But he said that the story of David in the Bible is one of the best pieces of literature ever created. So even if you don't believe in God and stuff, I think it's pretty awesome that someone back in the day, the biblical times, was able to craft something that a world-renowned author today who taught English at a top university says this is probably the best. He said he's the best writer of limericks. So I think the word's limerick. But anyway, story of David, he really likes.
Pretty sure there were no limericks.
It's not limerick
in the story of David.
Limerick,
I will tell you that there was no man from Nantucket.
What is the story?
A limerick is one of those ones like, you know what a limerick is now, right, Stevie?
Yeah, it's it's like a funny thing that came from like the Celtics. I don't know. What is it?
It's one of those things like it's a 5-line poem that the first 2 rhyme, the middle 2 rhyme, and then the last one rhymes with the first 2 and closes the whole thing out. I don't actually know any offhand.
I don't know.
Which is very odd. But there once was a man from Nantucket is the most famous limerick. You can Google it and read it, Stevie.
It kind of reminds me of haikus, but I got in trouble at school for writing haikus. It was like a project, and of course I made it horrible. And I didn't go to the principal for that one, but I think that was the point where they had to choose their battles with me. So, but I remember learning about limericks. I'm like, this is too difficult. But I think that would be fun to kind of incorporate into do you think people who read indie published, authors, do they break down things in books like that? Like, oh, this is a limerick. He put a limerick in here. I wonder if they do. Or do they just speed read? Because that's what I kind of get the feeling of, working with Jonathan Yan, is that most readers of, Kindle books are speed readers. I don't know if they kind of break down books like we do on this show.
I think there's a little bit of everybody. I know that some of the people who watch the podcast, they read fast, but they're also really, detail oriented, so they break down things often a lot more than I am. Like some of the people who I've gotten as my beta readers, they catch things that I didn't even think about, or they're like, oh, do this, highlight this, make this stand out more, and I had just kind of written it in. And so like there's a little bit of everybody, I think, that read indie stuff.
It's funny, I just went through a beta read copy of book 2, and I can tell who had English backgrounds or took English in college, because they try to break down my couldn'ts, wouldn'ts, and I'm like, that's what I used to do, but we can't do that as an author. It's kind of interesting. So today we're talking about the core, Andy.
Well, let me ask you this, Stevie. Okay. Have any of your core beliefs filtered into your writing?
Oh yeah, definitely. Honestly, I put a lot of spirituality into my books. I wasn't as brave as I am now. So back in the day, I was very, very little. Your thoughts create your reality. I do believe that, but I don't believe it's some witchcraft. And then in the newer books, I will actually use the word God, and I make sure to capitalize it. Like this, there's only a singular God, and people who usually do have more gods are usually like the lower people. I mean, it's not the most renowned way of doing it, but I would say that is definitely in there. Also, bullying. I cannot stand bullying. To
be fair, there are like 5 people in the world who are on the pro bullying side. So
I think my brother would be on that side. If he's watching this, he'll laugh. But, yeah, I didn't give it much thought, but core beliefs is something I actually just recently started, wondering. Like, if I got into an altercation, I'm a pretty strong person, like physically strong. I could hurt somebody, and I've been trained for many years. Like, what do I do? Do I talk my way out of it and lose pride over it, or does that go more with my? I'm thinking values, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I choose everything that comes out of my mouth usually, and the actions that I do through a filter, and that's through my values and core beliefs, which is a pretty mature thought to actually have thought that outside of just going by instinct, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about you? Oh yeah.
Me?
What about you, Kaylena?
Yeah, I was going to say Kaylena.
Yeah, I think, well, because I'm the one who brought up the topic, but I feel that my faith does come through in pretty much everything that I write, even if I'm not expressly writing about my faith. It's just those elements are so easy to pull from, especially, if you are familiar with the Bible, which if you look at a lot of Western literature, you'll see biblical allusions.
Interesting.
Throughout a lot of Western literature, yeah. Famous stuff and, fantasy. And fantasy is great because it presents an opportunity to be able to say something is true that may not be as easily reflected in the real world. Somebody I think who did this really well, but actually took one of the very difficult questions of this world, which is, why is there evil? and how do we deal with evil and believe that there is a God in a world where evil exists. So Brandon Barr, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him.
Yeah.
He wrote the Song of the World series, and I thought he did such an excellent job of grappling with that question. And you could see the struggle of, is there a good God who cares about people while all of this horrible stuff is happening to his characters? And he didn't shy away from the question. And I really appreciated that when I read it. And the writing was so good. And I loved that he went there. He went dark at places. And it felt like, okay, this is something that we can actually engage with and ask these questions and look at both sides, because it's not whitewashing or diminishing the bad that's in the world, but it is elevating that question, and it's being honest about the difficulty of it. So so that's just an example that I think.
Yeah, Brandon.
What about
I'm sorry, I was just going to say real quick that, shout out to Brandon Barr. Go buy his books. He was like one of the few people I could, talk about God with and like them not try to force it down my throat. He was just like, you just felt inspired just by hearing him. And he never lost his faith, which is like, that was a tough half a year, Andy, if you remember. That was rough. So yeah, go buy his books. But I'm sorry, Andy, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, Kaylena, you said that's like your belief shines through the story. Can you give us an example of how that happened?
Right. So,
or how it's portrayed in the book.
Okay. Yeah. So, in the Alumnus Chronicles, the book is about Mouse. She's the girl who's the protagonist of the story, and she loses her memory, and she has no idea who she is, and she ends up in this work camp, and they tell her she can't speak the language that they speak, so she's culture shocked, doesn't have any idea what's going on, and has to learn and try to pull bits and pieces of who she is from this, and she realizes she's an outsider, and soon after realizes that this isn't just a work camp where they're rehabilitating people, but it's actually like a concentration camp, and they're using these people for nefarious purposes. So throughout the story, she begins to have these increasing dreams or visions, and she's seeing things, and there's a connection there about like, is this true? Is this my past, or is this the future? And one of the elements that I pull in is that she begins to see what is called the Phoenix. It's this a symbol of her country, of a coming redemption. So that's one element that I pull in. And there's more that goes along with the story. I don't want to give too much away. And in the second story, I think I pull more heavily on those strings. So you get more of the world building in the second story that draws in kind of my core beliefs, I guess you could say. So
it's unfortunate. I feel if we go too far with trying to talk about God in fiction, I think we really do push back a significant portion of the audience, even if they are religious. Sometimes they don't want to go there, or they want to keep it separate or something. So this is just from business study, like just me studying. I would never implement, spirituality into a brand unless it had something to do with that. But
it's like with politics, like people don't necessarily want to read about politics in their story. They're often reading to escape the mess,
Right. Which is why I don't read Game of Thrones. It's just, I know it's very political, and, having read the Bible, I get kind of like, oh, I've seen this before. Or if you know anything about history with wars, you're like, okay. That's where I kind of lack. But that's the first thing I thought of when Kaylena said, that some people take from I kind of want to know more about the Westerns too. That's very interesting. I know that's not the topic.
No, she's not talking about like Westerns. She's talking about Western literature as in So that was where my mind went first. I was like, what wild Western do I know? But yeah, no, I that's what she meant, is just Western literature that was, European and
American, Western civilization literature. Yes.
And Canadian.
There you go.
Canada, no.
Some of the best writers in the world are Canadian, Stevie.
I'm not going to talk crap about.
I actually don't know.
I just know, like, They have really good food. Like, oh my God, I feel like I gained 20 pounds. The tea parties, man. If you go to British Columbia, Jesus, I went to three of them in 3 days, and I felt like I walked away with diabetes.
Is it like high tea?
Yeah, it's a high tea, exactly. What I call it?
Tea party.
Yeah, tea party. That's what it is to me.
I have never, I live in British Columbia, and I've never heard of high tea anywhere. Like maybe in Vancouver, there's a place or two.
It was Victoria. It starts with a V.
Of Victoria or Vancouver Island.
Yeah, some fancy place, and we went and had fancy. I've had it in London too, and I always seriously need a wheelchair walking out, or a wheelbarrow to put my gut in because I'm filled with tea, caffeine, and I feel like I'm having a heart attack with tons of energy, but I can't move.
And diabetes from all of the pastries.
And diabetes, seriously. Oh, and what Kaylena was saying about that question about why is there evil in the world, even though, we have God, read Genesis. Do an active reading of Genesis. It's fascinating what you can find in there if you actually take the time. And that's not part of today's video, but there's a lot of cool answers in Genesis. But with core values, Andy, you haven't answered the question yet. Have you put any of your core beliefs? I honestly, sorry, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say it's almost impossible not to put your core beliefs into your writing, especially at the beginning, because that's all you know.
Or even now, I think one of the things that I have written in sort of consciously and unconsciously is sort of duty in every single one of my stories. There's every one of the characters has a very strong sense of duty to someone or responsibility to someone. And it's like anybody who knows me will know that, that I get up at the same time every day. I sit down at the same time every day. I work hard every day. And then once all that's over, then I will, party as hardy as I'm physically capable of, or, temperamentally capable of, as it were. But like that is one thing, responsibility. I have such a strong sense of responsibility in my own life to where it's like, I felt guilty the last time I took an afternoon off when I didn't have any work to do because, I was going to play video games, or I started writing book 8 today because I finished all of my edits yesterday. And, there was a time when I would start books on Monday, like religiously. Mm-hmm. But now if I take Thursday and Friday off, that is 6 chapters, 15,000 words. How could I feel like a responsible, mature adult if I took those 2 days off? So it's sort of this driving factor in my life that absolutely, comes into every single one of the stories, that this person has this, the characters and this, I would say all of the good minor characters, the supporting ones, they're the ones who have the really strong sense of duty. Like they're the ones who will sacrifice, or they'll put their lives on the line, or they'll go the extra mile because of the sense of duty. And then anybody who is sort of on the evil side, or on the antagonist spectrums, they're the ones who are the selfish ones, or the ones who put themselves first. And I think that's something that sort of shines through every time there's sort of that villain encounter at the end. It's like, I don't give a shit about what anybody else wants. I want what I want. And that's probably the one thing that all of my villains have in common, as opposed to, maniacal cackling, which is fun.
Do you actually put in there maniacal cackling?
I think I have made a couple of maniacal villains just because it's fun. It's like every kind of villain has their fun. You want to get some villains that are really, three-dimensional and complex and all of that. But sometimes you just want somebody that's fun to hate. especially in the kind of series that I write where like everything is super violent, because it's like at the end of the day, you feel good when they die. There's this sense of justification when they end up dead, or when they end up, I don't think I've locked anybody up. Yeah.
I don't think I have either, now that you mention it.
I'm seriously trying to think. Oh, yes. So I spared one group of villains, but they were sort of like secondary antagonists as opposed to like the big bad of the series. In the Heirs of Destiny, because that's for a younger audience. So I didn't kill everybody off in spectacular fashion like I have with other series.
It's honestly like, so at the end of the book though, you don't kill the guy.
100%. No. So there's these villains, they've sort of been villains throughout, but it turns out they're not the big bad. They're kind of like the lesser evil. So they end up getting arrested and, you know, serve justice and all. I think that's the only time that I've ever had them arrest someone, just because, you know, you can't have young adult characters committing murder willy-nilly like you can with assassins and thieves and soldiers and stuff.
You actually reminded me something about the core beliefs, something that I read in a book a long time ago. And that is when you make a decision and then you later regret it or you feel bad about it, or is while you're making the decision, you feel bad about it. It's because it's going against your values. It's going against your core beliefs. It's that innate feeling inside you like, turn back now. So now that is a really cool idea, right? What if whenever we're writing a character, you know, if we are the writer, we get that feeling and we're like, uh-oh, this is going against his core beliefs. Can we I think good authors can do that. They can put themselves in there like, hey, he wouldn't do this. And I know readers can do it. Oh, you know, readers pick it out.
Yeah, well, so it's more obvious when someone does it in a book, because as a reader, you know, you've been following them for, you know, 10 pages, 100 pages, 5 books, 10 books, however long. So you know who they are because of how they've developed on a page. So when they do something that goes against their core beliefs, it stands out as wrong. Whereas I think when we as humans do things that go against our core beliefs, it's a lot more subtle. So it's harder to tell that you were doing something. But then there is that sort of cognitive dissonance. And I think it's this really uncomfortable feeling that, like, for example, guilt. Right? Guilt, cheating on your spouse, right? You feel guilty because you went against the core belief, which is, you know, the honor and duty and respect and all of that. So that's why you feel super guilty. Things like that. But I do think that people pretty much tend to make decisions based on their core beliefs. They just don't realize it. They don't realize that this one thing is this core belief until they sit down and say, okay, this decision that I just made, what influenced it? Because it's nearly impossible for you to make a decision that goes against the thing that defines who you are as a person.
Definitely. So this brought up a fun question I want to ask both of you. What is the most detailed characteristic, attribute, tick that you've put in a character and you're like, oh my God, this guy's getting detailed? I mean, since I've asked the question, I can answer it. I think mine was, it's not super surprising, but for Finn Featherstone, I knew what his favorite book was. And I knew what his favorite part of the book was in this fate book. And I knew what he would want to name his firstborn kid. And for my new character, I know what his favorite Netflix show is. So it's not super deep, but it's kind of fun to think that for a career, we actually can go that deep into these things that don't exist and only in our mind. So I don't know if you guys have one. It's
Kaylena, do you have any that you can think of offhand?
Yeah. So one of the things for Mouse when I'm writing her, that comes out in the book, and I don't have any reason to like really readily say this, but a mindset of like surviving. So there's a time where she's eating with people and she steals food because she was in a camp. So that's what she's used to doing. So there's traits and like ticks or something like that she will do because it's a survival mechanism that like normal people don't do when they're out of the house.
Even when it's not needed?
When it's not needed, yeah.
Okay.
She'll
I love that. That's really interesting. That honestly is a very good, I like that. That's really cool. It definitely shows you put thought into it, or you were very much in the moment while writing her. I love when that happens too. I wish it happened more often. But I wonder if we could go too far with, for me, I feel like my characters do a lot of internal thinking. Jonathan Yana says that's a really good thing. Jonathan's like, he's helping me to write books that sell instead of just me writing my passion, which it's been tough. It's been very difficult because I'm so business mindseted with everything else, but with books, I just like, it's mine. I don't care what people think. So internal dialogue really helps people connect to the character. So I wonder if we're all connected by core beliefs, even though they're different. If we see someone else is following theirs, does it give us this good feeling? This like, yes, I believe it. Oh, yes, I want to keep reading.
Well, yeah, I think Andy, in your Darkblade Avenger, your protagonist was a really kind of dark character. Well, dark adventure. But like I found when I was reading that book that I'm like rooting for him, even though he's doing like, not so nice things to certain people. And you get into that person's head and you start seeing things the way that they see, and you understand why they're motivated to do the things that they do. And I think that's really excellent. And when you're reading a book, that's what you want to be doing. You want to be involved in that person's mindset, not thinking of your own.
If you don't know what book she's talking about the Hunter series.
Well, Darkblade Avenger is the box set, and it's not the Dark Assassin series like Stevie keeps calling it.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't call it that, did I? I call it the Hunter series, right?
No, you called it Dark Assassin. You made the mistake because yours is Dark Assassin.
We came up with the name similar. I was like, "Oh, Andy, I'm calling mine the Dark," because I wrote the book. I was ready to publish. I'm like, "Oh my god, I don't have a name."
Series title. Yeah.
So, and then I came up, and then you came up with that, and so I was just eternally confused, forever.
Never right. To get that I'll allow it.
Darkblade Assassin. I seriously have to say that. Is it 2 words, 1 word? It's 1 word. Darkblade. Kind of looks like an MMORPG class. Darkblade.
That would be kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about, honestly, if it were like my podcast, it was the Stevie Collier podcast, and we're talking anything I want, I would like to go into details, because we don't have time for this, obviously, but what core beliefs should everyone have? What core beliefs should every villain have? I definitely feel that, the best villains, and Andy taught me this, and then I started seeing it everywhere, is they have something that they want, and they are flawed as well. They're people, and it's really interesting. And now I want to read my favorite books and kind of like, what is this villain's core beliefs? Because I'm playing Batman right now, and I'm like, Scarecrow, I don't know what his motive is. He wants to kill people in Gotham. Like, I don't care. Why
this is where the DC villains often fall a little bit short by comparison to the Marvel villains, because the DC ones, they're almost exclusively driven by the character stereotype that they're portraying. For example, Scarecrow, right? Scarecrow was Dr. Jonathan Crane, but he was twisted by the serum, right? So now his whole existence is to make other people afraid because of this, because of the fear serum that twisted him. The Joker has no core driving principle. He is simply a being of anarchy and chaos. Like that's his goal, is to make things devolve into chaos. And that is not exactly, it's not something that you can cling to in the hard times, right? It's not something that keeps you going. It's sort of like a passion, but passions wane and they wax and they wane. So something like that, it's like Joker can go silent, for days, years, weeks, months at a time, however long. And then he pops up and, gives Batman a new scare or makes him a new challenge. But it's not like he's driven towards anything. Whereas you have some of the Marvel characters, like Doctor Doom is probably one of my favorite of all time, because he knows exactly why he's doing what he's doing. In fact, in one of the Fantastic Four comics, he actually takes Reed Richards to the future, where he has conquered Latveria and the whole world, and the world is a utopia where everybody lives in harmony. They live, there's enough of everything, it's a perfect world, right? So he's like, I'm the only one who is strong enough to do this. So that's his whole reason. So you never doubt, no matter what he's doing, that's why he's doing it. Same with Magneto. Magneto is never misunderstood. His whole thing is that mutants have been downtrodden. They were downtrodden during his days in the concentration camps, and he's never going to let his people be like that, be treated like that again. And that's a perfect example of racism. And so you were asking earlier about what everyone's core beliefs should be. And I do believe that one of the core beliefs should be, in equality, in that everybody is created equal. And that whole thing, I think the more that people understand and come to that, you get rid of a lot of things like racism or sexism or all, the other isms, because there is this belief in equality. And I think that if everybody in the world could sort of develop that and let that rule their actions, the world would be a better place. I just solved every problem in the world.
I think.
Thank you. Good night.
What? Seriously, we need that. We need that today. Like being in a south part of Texas, I see more things than I want to, unfortunately, especially with Anyway, but yeah, I completely agree with you, Andy. Real quick before we get to the readings, we got to get to the reading. The Joker, Andy. I just kind of not a counter. I want to ask you a question because you're the king of DC. Wouldn't you say that he has some kind of internal? He's got some kind of goal with Batman because his world revolves around Batman and Batman's around Joker. What kind of motive is Joker's? What does he want with Batman? He just wants to screw with him all day and just make his life miserable.
I think this whole thing is proving that there, but for the grace of God, go I. Like he can, but that's just one of his story arcs. Like there is one specific run of the DC comics. I'm actually not as familiar with DC as with Marvel. Like Marvel's my realm of expertise. But there was one run where Batman, where Joker just did everything in his power to turn Batman into himself. Like I think that was the one where he killed Jason Todd, and we're all like it just put him through hell. And then Batman was gonna kill the Joker, but he stopped himself. Right. But again, see, that's one limited story arc, but it's not like it's an actual goal. Like it's not something that serves as a core belief in the sense of like Batman's thing is justice, is protecting the people, is basically stopping what happened to him from happening to everyone else. Right. So that drives his actions. That's at the core of who he is. But the Joker doesn't have that. I mean, sometimes he gets fixated on Batman, or some variants of him get fixated on Batman, or sometimes like the Heath Ledger character is just about proving that everybody in the world is just, there's no such thing as a hero, that everybody's garbage. But again, this is not a big overarching thing. That's something that you can cling to. It's just what they wrote in for that time. So that way of approaching villains, like a villain that's a stereotype, is good on face value. Like the Joker is probably one of the most famous villains of all time. Mm-hmm. But the more you get into him, the more you see there's not much more to him. Whereas take Darth Vader. Darth Vader, probably, I would say, top 3 villains of all time, right?
Really? I wouldn't have thought you would have said Vader.
Well, like Vader is very possibly the most iconic villain in fiction, right? Like no one who lives in this world today does not know who Darth Vader is, to varying degrees, right? It's almost impossible to find someone who doesn't know who Darth Vader is. There are people who don't read comic books, and so they may not know who the Joker is, aside from, the movies and stuff, but everybody knows Vader. And Vader, at the beginning, he's a villain. By the end of his trilogy, he's not a villain anymore, right? That is a villain who no one is going to change their mind about him being a villain. But the more that you get to see him, the more he gets developed, the more real he gets, the more you get to see what's underneath. And even the trilogy, the first trilogy the prequel trilogy, as we're calling it, a lot of people gave it shit, but what it did show really well was not really well, but it showed his devolution to becoming the person who would become Darth Vader. Mm-hmm. And so for all of the rubbish of that prequel trilogy, there was this interesting exploration of his journey to becoming, a younger version of Darth Vader. Sort of like how the new Joker movie did, watching Arthur Dent become that Joker. And so the more you understand a villain, often you can sympathize with them, and that's when they become real.
I don't know if you realize this, Kaylena, but Andy specializes in villains.
I like villains.
He was on a panel, and I swear, everyone was kind of nervous that Andy was up there. Not only is he 7 feet tall, but someone would ask a question if no one answered, and he was like, "Oh, I know, I'll tell you." It was really interesting. It was fun. It was in California, actually. It was really close. Anyway, so today we're gonna get right into the reading, but real quick about Arkham Knight. Batman is so rude. He talks to Alfred and he'll tell him what to do, and then he doesn't say thank you, and he just hangs up. It bothers me so bad. It takes me out of the story almost, because he's like, Alfred, go click. I'm like, please say thank you or bye. Just a small thanks. It's
that's actually something that I've been thinking about in my sci-fi story, is that the AI is, she's evolving to becoming much more of a person as opposed to just an AI. So the whole time I'm like, all right, the character doesn't just order her to do something, Or I start writing the order and I'm like, wait a minute, let's phrase this differently. So, like, can you do something or have you done something as opposed to do something,
Mm-hmm.
Kaylena, you'll like this. We both have artificial intelligences. But I made mine around Lisa, my girlfriend, because it was like to honor her dad for coming up with the story. But working with an AI in your story, I started saying like thank you to like Siri on my phone. That's kind of funny. Okay, we got to get to the reading because that's everyone's favorite part. We always get in trouble if we don't get to the reading.
All right.
So we're reading the Elmness Chronicles Mouse, and this is an excerpt from that. Kaylena, so I don't know if you've seen a few of our podcasts, but you are the directrice. You're the director of the show. Give us a little bit of backstory about what we're about to be reading, and then also you can tell us what parts to play or tell us the characters, and we'll decide. It's up to you. And you can decide if you want to narrate or be a character.
Okay. All right, sure. So the backstory here is the villain in the scene. His name is Slim. He is this very seedy, scrawny character, and he is intent on doing unseemly things to our protagonist, which is Mouse. And this is a scene she's running from him. So whoever wants to be the bad guy, you can raise your. Okay, there you go. You can be Slim. What do you want to do the Mouse or do you want to do the narration?
I'll leave that up to you because I usually do the women's voice and I usually narrate, so it's up to you. Whatever you want to play.
All right. And there's some internal dialogue here, so
okay. Usually the.
You know what? Why don't you? I want to hear you do it the women's voice.
All right.
Great.
Well done.
Do it. That'll be fun.
All right, so here we go.
Okay.
Looks like I found you,
Slim said, a ferocious and deranged grin upon his lips. He drew in tired, shallow breaths, sweat dripping from his forehead and foam bubbling at the corners of his mouth. Blood, brambles, and mud covered his torn clothes, as if he had clawed his way out of the ground just to find her. His fist clenched the fabric of her coveralls tightly, furiously pulling at them to bring her closer. Mouse let out a frightened squeak as she fought against his grip.
Thought I wouldn't be smart enough to realize you'd come out this way, did you?
Slim snapped, jerking her violently.
Well, I was. I knew old Red must have something pretty valuable in there, or else he wouldn't have made sure you got it. And you knew it too. That's why you ran this way. Didn't want the others to find you with it. Didn't want anyone to know.
Let go of me,
Mouse cried.
It's got nothing to do with you.
No?
Slim growled.
You listen here. Do you know what I'm gonna do? Do you? I'm gonna do a little magic, see?
Slim tugged harder, prevailing, and she slowly slid toward him. She could see the whites of his eyes glowing with sinister satisfaction in the darkness.
Once I pull you out of there, I'm gonna have my way with you. By the time I'm done, you'll be begging to die.
Slim's eyes gleamed ravenously as he spoke.
Then I'm gonna wring the life out of you. I'ma watch you die, slow and painful. But don't worry, lovely. I'll make sure this sack of yours is safe with the enforcement squad. You'll be making Slim their hero, after all.
Mouse whimpered as Slim dragged her toward him, his face now level with hers. He gawped at her, licking his lips hungrily as he drew her closer.
Shh, now. Don't make a fuss. You'll ruin the fun.
The palms of Mouse's hands began to tear and bleed as they slid up against the stone, failing to stop her descent to certain death. She searched the crevice for something, anything that could save her, when her gaze fell upon the pillowcase, still wrapped tightly around her arm. It hung heavy on her, grinding painfully against her wrist as she tried desperately to pull away from Slim. With a swing of her arm, Mouse slammed the contents of the case onto the top of Slim's head. He bellowed in surprise and pain. His grip loosened briefly. Slim swayed and toppled backward for a moment, but it was enough for Mouse to pull herself free, scurrying back into the gap. The crumbling rocks scraped at her arms and face again as she dragged herself through the crack, but she felt nothing but the exhilarating rush of freedom. At the other end of the wall, Mouse stared out into the black, unknown world from which she had retreated only moments ago, terrified of the consequences. As Mouse glanced back through the crevice, just as Slim was hoisting himself up into it, those consequences were much less concerning now. Just as she had, Slim found it fairly easy to slip himself through the crack in the wall. Frantically, she looked down, swiftly judging the distance to the ground. This side of the wall was much higher, the ground beneath hard, rocky, and unforgiving. Even so, broken ankles or skulls were small matters if she wound up dead first. With a deep breath, Mouse got herself as close to the edge as possible, and closing her eyes, jumped. She landed on her feet, but pitched forward upon impact and fell on her hands and chest. The blow knocked the wind out of her. Mouse rolled to her side, dry heaving. The sky above her swam a little as the pain swelled, but it subsided in time for her to see Slim's head poking out from the gap above her. As quick as she could manage, she rolled back to her hands, pushed herself up, and began sprinting headlong down the mountainside. The gnarled trees and great boulders blurred and faded into the darkness as she whipped past them, her downward momentum carrying her further along the slope than her tired, aching legs could on their own. Her knees buckled in complaint at every forceful plant of her foot. Still she continued her dangerous descent, too afraid of falling to stop or look back. Scattered sticks, loose stones, and overgrown roots laid treacherous traps for her. By some miracle she went on, only narrowly avoiding a trip or a slip that would have her tumbling down the mountainside. Over the sound of her own body crashing through the undergrowth, Mouse could hear Slim close behind. He roared murderously down the summit, his footfalls and breaths heavy. Mouse made quick work of getting down the mountain, but Slim gained with every step. Her lungs burned and her legs began to crumple, but she did not stop. Terror whipped her onward, even as the mountainside plunged into the sea of mist in front of her. She could lose him in the mist, as she did before, but there was no telling what was waiting for her beneath its pall. With no time to think, and no option to go back, she took a leaping stride into the shroud. Fog settled on her skin as it swallowed her whole. The taste of sulfur and grit filled her mouth, and she stopped short, coughing and struggling to breathe. Mouse looked intently into the fog, but it was useless. Wisps of white seethed in every direction, heavy like a drape on her shoulders. It was this heaviness that nearly overwhelmed her, catching the breath in her throat and pressing tightly against her. Mouse tried to breathe normally all the same, hoping her wheezing breaths had not already given her position away to Slim or anything else lurking in the haze. She pulled the collar of her cotton undershirt up over her mouth to stifle it. This served to filter the air, and for the time being it relieved Mouse of its distinct taste. Calmer and no longer gasping, Mouse proceeded deeper into the fog. There was no mist like the one that now enveloped her. She passed through, its thick, opaque layers like parting curtain after curtain. It muffled the sound of her very footfalls from her own ears. Mouse could only wonder if Slim had actually followed her. She listened for a moment. There was nothing. Maybe he could not hear her either. Then again, he had found her all too easily only moments ago, even after she had eluded him half the night. Mouse picked up her pace, attempting to walk in a straight line. Though rendered deaf and mute by the mist, she kept on, hoping against hope that she would not cross paths with her pursuer. Beneath her feet, the terrain changed, exchanging the rocky soil for short grass and sparse undergrowth. The tiny teeth of thorns and brambles snagged at the legs of her coveralls as she passed. A heavy hush blanketed Mouse as she continued into the valley. Nothing but the air stirred around her. Silence. Had Slim lost her? Maybe, but Mouse could not shake a base fear that there lay greater danger in the quiet. It was this quiet that was all wrong. Many nights in the barracks, she had often laid awake, listening to the sounds of various creatures in the dark. She had not expected to see them in the mist, but she thought she might at least hear something. Yet everything around her felt deathly still, just as if these same creatures collectively held their breath, hushed and hidden from that which lurked within. Presently, the scent of sulfur and soot she had come to know so well mingled with something else, something foul and stomach-churning. There was only one smell she could compare it to, and that was the stench of that terrible house along the market she encountered her first day on the summit, the disease and injury unit.
The smell of death.
A prickle of fear ran down her spine. What horrors did she blindly wander toward? The sound of heavy footfalls floated dully on the thick air. Mouse halted mid-stride. Slapping footsteps stopped abruptly, any echo dying immediately in the dense air. From what sounded like miles away, a loud cackle erupted, and she could hear Slim yelling through the fog.
"What are you playing at, little girl?"
He shouted with sadistic amusement.
"Ready to give up yet?"
Mouse turned around in a panic, but she could not see 2 feet in front of her, let alone wherever Slim stood. Could he see her? Or did he just hear her breathing? Mouse crouched and held her shirt over her mouth. A cold laugh reached her ears.
"Ah, yes, it's been a long night, but you've learned an important lesson. Slim always gets what he wants."
Without warning, the foul odor now permeated the air. She gagged, the sudden pungent stench overwhelming her senses. Slim must have smelled it too, for he choked as well.
"Ah, what is that? Hey, get back here!"
Mouse furrowed her brow, thoroughly confused. His mocking tone suggested he had once again cornered her, and yet Mouse felt he was very far away. Too far away.
Does he see me, or only something he thinks is me?
Mouse made herself as small as possible, gripping the ground with quivering hands. The mist, suddenly turbulent, displaced above her, and the prickling shiver returned to race down her spine. Mouse swiveled her head as slowly as she dared. Just beyond the opaque curtain of mist loomed a shadow, dark and vast, moving stealthily to her right. A sense of crushing terror came crashing over, and she bit her lip to resist the overpowering desire to scream. The shadow turned away, fading once again into the mist. She nearly collapsed in relief, but steadied herself as she heard Slim's pounding footsteps, again, though farther from her than before. They stuttered to a halt.
"You're done. I've got you,"
he said. Low, rattling growls disturbed the heavy air. Mouse felt more than heard them, and panic rose in her throat.
Keep still,
she thought desperately, fighting the impulse to flee. She could hear Slim shuffling his feet, stop, and turn about. An unnerving silence filled the space between them and lingered, broken by a sudden, ear-splitting scream. Shadowy masses rushed past, and the mist cresting and falling like waves around her. Mouse covered her ears and cowered close to the ground, unable to stifle the sounds of Slim's shrieks of agony. The only sound that could drown that horror out was the clamor of barks, snarls, and howls that followed. Then a sickening crunch, and Slim's screams ceased.
Woohoo!
Very
that was fun. I love the idea of Slim. I like bad guys. In case that wasn't apparent.
I was trying to not laugh because you did it so well. I was like, oh my gosh, that's like almost exactly as I imagined him sounding.
That's awesome. I love doing the weirder voices. Like I can never do the straight ones. I always try to get like the odd ones.
That was probably one of my favorite voices by you, actually.
Thank you. I think between this one and the one that I did for Rebecca's, the creepy Winnie the Pooh, that one was fun.
God, I hate that one in a good way. Like, Jesus Lord. It made me feel slippery. I don't know. Slimy. It was horrible. Especially that part you did. Oh, God. I just couldn't stand it. It stuck. It stuck with me. Well, Kaylena, thank you so much for that awesome reading. Why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Okay. Well, I'm on Amazon, so you can find the Elmness Chronicles there, and when the rest come, you'll find them there too. I also have right now a speculative piece. It's an apocalyptic sci-fi novelette called The Canid Project. That's free on Amazon right now as well for the next 2 days. I'm also on Facebook and I'm on Instagram as @Kaylena Radcliffe. Easy enough if you can spell it. And I have a WordPress blog as well.
Awesome.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, go check out that book right now. You heard it here first on the Fantasy Fiends show. You're going to love it. Just make sure when you're reading it that you hear Andy's voice in your head and you'll have nightmares. Andy, anything else? I know next week we have Nick Cole.
Yeah.
His name, Nick Cole, who is the author of The Legionnaire.
I think he's one of the Galaxy's Edge.
That's right.
Authors.
Yeah, he's one of them. He's with Jake or something. But
Jason Anspach or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Well, it's going to be awesome because that's a really popular book. I haven't had time to read it, but we will be hitting a reading with that book, of course. So that is it for this week's Fantasy Fiends podcast/show. We will see you next week. Super excited about that. Kaylena, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Very welcome. All right. We'll see you guys next week for another fantastic episode of the Fantasy Fiends show. Good night.
No way.